I try to stay organized so I don't lose my mind because watching wrestling can also take a toll on you.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by the one and only Iridian from Rest Friends and uh, the collision recap on Fightful. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on.
So, if we take this back, Iridian, to the very beginning, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
Oh man, I think I remember watching when I was a little kid at my grandparents' house. They used to have it on and it was SmackDown because it was a local channel. So that's like what we had. And I'm like, okay, let's watch this. So my uncles would watch it, my dad would watch it. And it's just something that I was like, oh, well, let me hang out with them and see what they're watching. And I got addicted really, really easily. I think the first match that I saw was like a chairs match. And I'm like, oh my God, this is kind of cool. Like I'm liking the energy that they're giving. I think, I saw Shawn Michaels and like John Cena and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is for me. And I just never really grew out of it.
You brought up there that John Cena, Shawn Michaels were the first wrestlers you were exposed to. So that would
Yeah.
have been maybe around 2009, 2010. I'm not sure on the year. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, it was pretty early on because I still remember playing like Raw versus SmackDown 2007. So I remember
Ah,
I had like my PlayStation and that was like one of my early video games too that I had. So once I found wrestling, I think I was really like obsessed with it on like watching it, the WWE magazines and like the video games too.
mm. You talked about there being obsessed with it when you discover it. So when you do discover it, how do you go about consuming it? Is it sort of a family night thing where you all gather around and watch when it's on? Are you like sitting on your own and watching it? How are you consuming it when you do discover it?
So I started watching it with my dad. And from then on, like every Monday or every Friday, like we would make a habit of watching it together. And I think once I got to like high school, I was like, I'm gonna stop watching wrestling. This isn't cool anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, I went to college and when I came back like from the first year, like summer break, I think that was like around the time that Seth Rollins had cashed in his money in the bank at Mania. And I'm like, oh my God, why did I stop watching this? I'm like, this is still so cool. So, I got back into it. And then it's something that I started to get my dad back into. So now we both watch it. If he doesn't watch it live, but I will tell him, oh my God, Dad, you need to watch this match with me. Like it's so good. So it's something that I bond with my dad with over. And I think that's pretty cool.
Mm. You brought up there you're bonding with your dad over it. What
Mhm.
about other family members' reaction? Was there anyone, because it seems like your family was a big wrestling family. Was there anyone in your family that was like, this is silly. I don't know why you like this sort
You
of
know what?
thing?
It's funny that you mentioned that because my mom absolutely hates it. She cannot watch wrestling with us. She says that she feels the pain of the wrestlers when she watches it. So she gets anxiety and she's like, I can't do this. I have her watch, some of the lighter matches. I have I show her the women's matches because I'm like, Mom, the women are fighting too. I think this is pretty cool. And she likes the women's matches more than the men's matches, but she's just not a really big fan overall. But she'll know some wrestlers.
Mm. I think that's very cool though that you've got both aspects of the spectrum. So you brought up there being taking wrestling away because, in your own words, it wasn't cool and you wanted to be cool. But then you had that moment where you was like, why did I stop watching? So if
Yeah.
someone is going through that currently, where they're maybe experiencing a bit of doubt as a wrestling fan, maybe, what would your advice be to them if like they're thinking about stopping to watching, but what would your advice be to maybe to help them continue watching?
You know what? I would always say just to give it one more chance. And we have so much wrestling available to us today. It's not like back in the day where we only had a certain couple channels. Like now there's so many wrestling companies, there's so many events that you can go to. I would definitely say that people should go and experience it one more time. I think that it's just, that moment for me watching it again. And I'm like, it was just something that I'm like, man, I really loved this growing up. And it gave a little bit of nostalgia. So I would tell everybody to just watch it one more time if you're really, struggling, because some of the best wrestling and some of the best storylines are happening right now.
Mm, I would agree with that. So you brought up there uh, the best storylines and things there. Currently, what to as we record this in August of 2023, what keeps you excited as a wrestling fan? What are you currently enjoying? Things like that.
Oh man, I think WWE has really been doing some great work with the bloodline and just the storyline on that you can follow. And I think it's going to be historic. People are always going to end up talking about that. So it's giving novela, and that just basically means like a soap opera, but a Spanish soap opera, which is so much more dramatic, so much more craziness that happens. So I think that that's, a story that can be described as a soap opera. There's also just a lot of great wrestling. So I do love a lot of the work that Britt Baker's doing. This Adam Cole and MJF, so story that's being built up. There's a lot of great stories that are happening. And now we can see that. And I'm super excited for, like, let's say if you're just getting into wrestling, there's a lot of different things that you can like. So it would be super easy for someone to become a fan.
Mm. So, do you ever think about, and this might sound like a very silly question, do you ever think about where your life might be if you'd never discovered wrestling? With all the work that you do within the media side, do you ever think about what if I hadn't discovered wrestling?
Oh, absolutely. Ever since I was little, I would pretend that I had a YouTube channel with my little brother, and it would be called the Edie and Carlo Show. And I'm like, oh, we would, be in our car and lower down the like the little mirrors. So we would talk into the mirror and pretend that was our camera. And I've always just wanted to do that. And when I discovered wrestling, I was like, oh my God, this is something that I could see myself doing. I wanted to be a wrestler when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I just didn't know that there was wrestling schools. I didn't know people could get into that. So I found out pretty late in my life about wrestling schools. Um, it's something that I really appreciate that's in my life because, wrestling has really given me a different community. A lot of my new friends, some of my greatest friends that I've made are from the wrestling community. And it's just given me a lot of opportunities that I would never have imagined to get. I have had the opportunity to interview WWE wrestlers because I know, wrestling. I work in radio, but I always tell people that I love wrestling. And when the opportunity came at my last job, they're like, "Hey, WWE is doing media here. Would you like to interview them? Because we know that you are the fan." I was the only fan there, so basically, I was the only person that was qualified to do the interviews. And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And getting into it more now, I see that I would like to be doing more in regards to talking about wrestling, and I'm just super excited to see where my love for wrestling will take me.
That's very cool. So you brought up there working radio. How did you get started working in radio? But also, how do you feel like your work in radio helped you with your current career almost in podcasting?
Yeah, so I was a very, very shy kid growing up. I didn't really like to talk, and my voice has always been like on the deeper side. And people have always let me know when I was growing up that I had a lower toned voice. And that always kind of just made me self-conscious. And I kind of just, didn't really talk. So when I got to my like eighth grade year, a lot of my teachers were like, hey, maybe you should try public speaking. Maybe that would be a good route for you to do. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess. So, they helped me, they trained me. And then like for our graduation ceremony, I was able to like do some public speaking. And I remember when I graduated elementary school, my one of my teachers was like, hey, I think you should do radio when you go to college. I think you should go to this college and I think you should study radio. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I went to high school, and with that in mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do radio. And I got my degree in radio in 2018. And I have just loved it ever since. I got to have a radio show in college, and I started working in radio 2 years before I graduated.
Ooh.
So I think that that has just given me so much. What's the word? I'm not self-conscious anymore. I've gotten a little bit more confidence.
Confidence, maybe?
Yes. Yeah, I've gotten a little bit more confidence, and that has just helped me tremendously to continue to do what I want, because if I didn't have that confidence and that support, I don't think I would have made a YouTube channel or I would have made a podcast. And when it actually happened when I was getting my radio degree, that I took a podcasting class, and we had to pick, everyone had to pick what their podcast was going to be about. And I was unsure of like what I could talk about for hours on end, every week having something new. And I'm like, well, I like wrestling. Why don't I make a wrestling podcast? So that's like the beginnings of that. And, I've been podcasting about wrestling since.
That's very cool. You talk about radio there.
Mhm,
If do we? I asked someone this question when it comes to wrestling media
mhm.
the other day. Do you believe that anyone can be a radio presenter, or do you believe that like it takes someone with a special talent and you need to go to school for it?
Mhm. You know what? Anybody, I feel, if they are, trained, they can absolutely do it. It's not even, I guess, training, and it's not even about going to school. It's about, practicing, practicing your skill, because I feel like any skill can be learned. I didn't know anything about radio when I started school. I didn't know how to interview. I didn't know how to edit audio, but I learned how to do it. And I feel like anybody can learn how to do it. And if you're passionate about it, if you really work at it, I do believe that, you might not think that you're able to, but I think anybody really can if they work hard at it. Some people just have it, and, great for them, but other people have to work a little bit harder. And I do think that, as long as you practice and you love it, you can totally make it work.
Which wrestler do you think would make a great radio presenter?
Oh, that is a great question. Oh my goodness. Well, I feel like The Miz has a really, really great personality, and he's already been on reality TV. So I think he would be good. Also, Grayson Waller, he is giving me like top 40 pop station vibes.
Mm.
So I think he would be really, really good. I think Walter would probably be like a late night rock station host.
He's got
Um,
that very deep voice, hasn't he? Yeah.
yeah, so I think that he would be really good, like late nights. Oh, that's a fun question. I like that one. I'm probably gonna be thinking about that for the rest of the day.
I'm
Some,
gonna I'm gonna flip the question on you in a second.
oh, I feel like I know what's coming. Oh man.
Yeah.
Um, who else would be really good? There's so many people. I honestly think Otis and Chad Gable would be a good team. Like for a morning show, I think that would be totally chaotic.
Now I
But
want to see that.
yeah, I think there'd be crazy chaotic. I think MJF would have a crazy, crazy show because I think he's
instead
so
of
well
an
spoken.
instead of an sorry to interrupt, but I just
No, you're
thought
good.
before instead of a advice call-in show, he could have like a roast people call-in show.
That would be amazing. Yes. Yeah. MJF also, oh man, who else? There's just so many people. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think, that's great.
Okay, now flipping the question. Which radio presenters would you like to see as wrestlers?
Oh, wow. Interesting. Oh man. There's a lot of people. And you know what? It's interesting because a lot of radio people are sports fans.
Hmm.
So I think that that would translate really, really well. Man, there's a lot of radio people out there. I don't know, I think I don't know. I can't off the top of my head think there's a host here in Chicago by the name of Showbiz Shelley, and
Hmm.
she does like a lot of pop, like a top 40 music type of thing. And I think she'd be good in the women's division. I think that would work. Yeah, there's a lot of people. I can't think of anybody at the top of my head, but that's a great question.
That's very cool. So you talked about the everything you've done in
Mhm.
wrestling media, radio, and stuff. So how do you balance? Like, I'm really curious to know this.
Mhm.
Music is something we all use as like, I'm gonna decompress,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put some music on in the background, I'm gonna dance or something. How do you balance your fandom for music when you've got to run a radio show and talk about it all the time?
Yeah. And you know what? It's crazy that you say that because when I get to work, I'm listening to audio all day. So I have to, listen to what's on air, and then I'll have to edit the podcasts and still like re-listen to audio. So sometimes when I leave work, I just listen to nothing. I'll put my headphones in and I'll just walk home and just, so people like don't bother me with my headphones on, but like so I can still hear just actual sounds instead of music because I feel like that's just sometimes exhausting. And I listen to music on the way to work, but on the way back, it's just like I need to decompress, I need to chill. I might have like a podcast on to still feel some sense of conversation. But when it comes to music, sometimes I do get tired myself.
Mm, I understand what you're saying completely there. And then now, how do you balance now that you're working more within the wrestling media with Wrestle Fr Rest Friends and
Yeah.
Fightful? How do you balance your fandom for wrestling when you have to talk about wrestling a lot?
Yeah, you know what? That's a little tough. I have a planner where I organize my time, and I talk with my co-host Teddy, and I'm like, okay, well, can you come over this day and we'll talk about these two shows, and then Saturday I'm completely unavailable because I work Saturdays and then I have to get home, get ready for Collision. So my Saturdays are taken up, and I just kind of balance the rest of the week when it comes to wrestling, because basically right now I only focus on AEW and WWE. But sometimes on Rest Friends, we will talk about New Japan. We'll talk about Impact. We'll talk about some local shows that are happening here. So it's really about like staying organized with what I want to watch. And even when we do our podcast, Rest Friends, I kind of just like, okay, well, I have three bullet points and they might be what we talked about with Collision, but I have different thoughts here. So let me talk about it. With Collision, I actually have like my notebook here. This notebook has like saved my life, like taking notes and like what I have to do, but I have like my little journal. So like I've been filling it up, watching stuff since it's popped up, but just I try to stay organized so I don't lose my mind because watching wrestling can also take a toll on you.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying completely there. So how does Iridian make sure she's still a fan of wrestling? How do you avoid like the
Mhm.
burnout of so much you have to do and things like that? How do you make sure you're still a fan that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So I sometimes get uh just tired. I sometimes get tired of like, oh, I have to watch Monday Night Raw or I have to watch SmackDown. So if I'm not feeling it that night, I just won't watch it. I'll get some of the clips on YouTube so I don't get overwhelmed. I do still like I feel like I can't miss AEW Dynamite. That's a show that I absolutely love. So I always make it a habit to at least watch all of that to make sure that that I still watch something that I love. So I do a lot of, the meet and greets that come around. I go to some of the shows when they're in town, and I love attending live shows. I love meeting the wrestlers. So I think that that's how I keep like super excited. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to meet this person. Or, oh man, I just can't wait. In 2 weeks, I'm going to show live. So that's how I keep my love alive is to, meet and greets, live events, and just watching what I love.
I understand what you're saying there completely. So you brought up that Dynamite is the show that you love currently there.
Mhm.
What if Sean came to you and was like, Iridian, so and so sick. We need you to do the Dynamite recap this week. Would that be something you'd be interested in, or would you like to keep Dynamite as your this is my fun show? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because I feel like at Fightful we are a close family. So if anybody can't do anything, there will be a lot of us that volunteer. Or Sean might say, "Hey, is anybody available for this time?" And then he'll see who can go. But it's interesting that you mentioned that because when you're forced, I guess not forced, but when you're covering a show, sometimes you're like, oh man, I can't really enjoy this because I'm taking notes or because I have to memorize this. But I find it really easy to talk about shows when you love them. So if, something happened and they're like, "Hey, can you cover Dynamite?" I would absolutely do it because it's a show that I love watching. Same thing with Collision. Collision has been so good. And
Hmm.
it's something that I look forward to watching every week. So that just makes it easier to cover.
As we sit here in, as I say, August of 2023, I feel like I have to say that only because, like I say, this probably won't go up for a little while. But um, do you believe Collision has had a bad show yet?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I think they've had some really great shows. And I feel like I'm excited anytime I watch it. They've just given something new to the table. So I think that it can only really get better from here, which is crazy because they've had some fantastic shows.
Hmm. I, I need to get better at segues. I do apologize.
You're doing great.
Thank you. I do apologize. So, how does Rest Friends come about, sort of thing? How do you start with Rest Friends and things like that?
Yeah. Yeah, so Rust Friends, I started, it was me and my cousin Teddy. And, she also grew up watching wrestling when she was a little kid. And we kind of didn't know about each other's love for wrestling until we were much older. So probably about 4 or 5 years ago, she and I were talking about wrestling, and I'm like, oh man, I would really want to make a YouTube channel just for us to talk about wrestling. And she wanted to have a podcast first. I held off. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe let's do the YouTube first and then we can do the podcast. So we started our YouTube channel, but we didn't really post anything until 2019. But we were like reactions to like Royal Rumbles. We were doing unboxings. We're still doing a lot of couple of interviews because that's when I was working in radio and I was getting the WWE interviews. So I'm like, that would be a perfect platform to post them. So then we had our YouTube channel for a year. We had about probably 200 subscribers, which is really nothing, but so hard. It's so hard to get subscribers on YouTube. People have no idea.
Yep.
And a year later, we did our that. And it has just been such a crazy journey because you have to learn about like monetization and, just even it feels like you have to beg people to subscribe for a long time. But once you hit like this, like set number, then people just start subscribing. So it's really weird. We spent probably 4 years trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and we're finally there. And then after the 1,000 subscribers, like we were just able to get so many more. But it's something that I like to do. I like to edit videos. I like to hang out with my cousin, and I like to talk about wrestling. So it made so much sense for us, and we've worked really hard to create Rest Friends. She actually came up with that word. I didn't even know what that meant, but she was like, "Oh, it's like we're best friends. We're best friends. We're best friends." Oh wow, that's a word. I use that, and I was like, "Let me trademark it before somebody takes it." But yeah, we've really loved wrestling, and Rest Friends is my baby, so I really care for it, and I'm super excited to see where we're gonna go in the future with it.
That's very cool. So you talk. What are before we go into the Fightful stuff? What
Yeah.
are some of your goals for Rest Friends and stuff like that?
Oh man, I really want to be on a red carpet of some sort. Like I want to be on a movie premiere. I want to be interviewing talent. I want to be, at a pre-show or something. I think that would be really cool. But, basically Rest Friends was, I wanted to interview wrestlers, and I feel like it has given me a platform to be able to do that. And our podcast on the other side has given us a chance to just, talk about what we want, kind of give our opinions. So my goal for Rest Friends is honestly to have it for as long as possible. I want people to listen and be like, oh, I want to be a Rest Friend. And basically, like anybody can be a Rest Friend. If you are friends with somebody who also loves wrestling and you really like their vibe, they can be your Rest Friend. So I feel like we really started this to make a space for women because there wasn't a lot of spaces for women to talk about wrestling in general. and, to share the fandom. And I think that we have been able to meet so many women now just because we started the platform and we've met other creators. I think that we want to continue to expand to show women that they can also talk about sports, that they can talk about wrestling, they can share their love without being questioned. So yeah, I just want to continue to grow our platform and to just keep having fun with it because that's what we're doing.
Before we get into the Fightful stuff, this might sound like a big and sort of ignorant question, but like if Sean had said to you, I want to bring you on for the collision recap,
Mhm.
but you have to get rid of rest friends, would that
Mhm.
have been a deal breaker?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I would have been like, what, Rest Friends is something that I've worked really, really hard for. And even if any they've asked at a couple of the places that I've worked, like, hey, do you want to bring your podcast on? But then like it wouldn't be your podcast. I'm like, oh, well, no, that's not fun. Like it's my show. I know, what has gone into it, the work that I've done, a lot of things that I've sacrificed for it, and Teddy and I have just really, really worked for it. So I don't see if I had to let it go because of somebody else, like I wouldn't be able to do that.
I understand completely. So as we get into your work the Fightful for the collision review, how do
Mhm.
you connect with the Fightful crew? How do you start doing the collision review and things like that?
Yeah. So I actually was on Day After Dynamite with Will Washington, when I think his last couple, weeks that he was there. And I was on his show. We had been introduced before by one of my friends who I also have a segment with on her podcast, Wrestling Wind Down. Lo had been on a couple shows for Fightful, and she also mentioned that I would probably be a good fit. So I was on with Will. And, Will, after the show, he messages me, said it was a good job. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. And a couple months go on. Sean Ross Sapp tweets out that he wants, or that there's an idea of a post collision show and if anybody would be interested. So, of course, in the comments, I'm like, oh my God, yes, absolutely, I'd be interested. And Will messages me and he's like, hey, just so you know, I put your name out there. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks so much for recommending me. And Will at this time, I think he was on his way to transition out to finally work in AEW. So Sean, I message him privately and I let him know that I'm interested. And like 2 weeks later, I hadn't heard back from him. And then I think like the day of my final for my because I went back to school to get my master's degree. So it's like the day of my finals, Sean messages me and he's like, "Hey, would you still be interested in hosting?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he's like, "Perfect. You would be with two other people that I have in mind and you would be co-hosting." And I said, "Perfect. Sign me up." So I'm on the train and people start congratulating me. I didn't know why. And I had my Twitter notifications muted. So
Ah,
people are like, go on Twitter. And I'm like, what do you mean go on Twitter? What's happening? So I go on Twitter. And sure enough, Sean Ross Sapp has posted the graphic that now we are going to be the post show for AW Collision. It's me, Rick, and Cresta. And I'm like, oh my God. And then it's getting likes. People are sharing it. I'm like, my notifications are blowing up once I turn them on. I had no idea why people were congratulating me. I'm like, oh, thanks. I'll have a great day because you congratulated me. I don't know why you're congratulating me, but okay. Um, yeah. So, Sean was talking to me and he's been really, really great. Everybody at Fightful has just been so supportive. And me, Krista, and Rick had like a mini meeting before our first episode just to see how
like
our
a
energy.
pilot almost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just to see how our energy was going to work. And it was just a great time. And we're like, guys, we got this. It'll be fine. And I think the first episode, Sean comes on and he's introducing everybody and he's like, if anybody's likely to be on the AEW payroll, it's gonna be Iridian because Will recommended her and Will is at, AEW now. And I'm like, no, it's not like that. Like it just happened.
Your
Um,
poor
I
mentions.
was like, no, no. But yeah, it's been really, really great. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. It was, Will recommended me to Sean, and then Sean was like, you know what, let's give her a chance. And I'm just super thankful to Sean for even just, considering me because he didn't have to, right? I bet you there's so many other people who were also in his mentions, but I did when I reached out to him, I'm like, hey, I do have some little experience. I have a podcast, I have a YouTube channel, so take with that what you will. And yeah, I've been having just so much fun in Fightful.
That's so cool. You brought up there having fun with Fightful,
Mhm.
not to put bad juju in the world or things like
Yeah.
that, but if it stopped being fun or maybe you got burnt out on Collision too much or something like
Mhm.
that, would you have to say to Sean, look, I appreciate this opportunity, but
Mhm.
I've got to step away?
Yeah, you know what? If it ever stopped being fun, there would just have to be like a reevaluation because it is tough sometimes, always just talking about wrestling. But at the end of the day, like that's the job. And a lot of people, we got to go to work. And even if we don't like work that day, but it's okay because you might like work the next day. So I don't think that it's something that I would ever give up. I would just kind of like manage my headspace a little bit better because I do love wrestling. So if I had to take a break from Rest Friends for like a week or two, we've done that before where we're like overwhelmed with wrestling and we're like, hey guys, we're not gonna, talk about it here, but still chat with us on our DMs, hit us up on Instagram or Twitter. We'll still talk about it with you. We're just not gonna record an episode this week.
Hmm. What do you talk about there, not recording an episode sometimes? What do you do to sort of maintain the fun as a content creator? Like
Yeah.
when you're getting ready to go on Collision, the Collision review, or things like that, how do you get in the mindset to go, okay, it's time to podcast now, sort
Yeah.
of thing?
So it's interesting that you say that because I get home from work and then I have like about 3 hours free before AEW starts. So I usually already have my hair and makeup done. But what I will do is kind of like kind of redo my hair, kind of redo my makeup, just so I can be like, okay, in the mindset of like, I'm going to be on camera, I have to get ready. So then if I look great, I'll feel great. And, I'll have my notes, I'll be prepared. And getting ready to me always just kind of like perks me up a little bit more. So that's kind of like where my mindset is like, okay, I already have my hair, I have my makeup. Now I'm ready to do a show. And, watching it for the 2 hours, I'll be like, okay. But that last show, I will come in, the last match of Collision, I will come and I'll watch it on my computer. So I have my setup ready to go. I make sure I have my water so I'm prepared. It's just like a little routine that I do, but that's how I get into like the mindset of, all right, we're about to record, let's do it.
What about afterwards? How do you decompress and then go back to what I call it civilian life. Some people laugh, others don't. She laughed, so I'll take that. But some people laugh, some people don't. What do you do to sort of go back into
Yeah.
civilian life?
Yeah, how do we go back to the civilian starter pack? Um, after Collision, after the show's done, we're kind of all on the same boat of like, oh my God, guys, we talked for an hour and a half about wrestling. For Rick, it's like super late because he's like an hour ahead of me. So it's like super, super late for him. And Cresta, it's also super late. So we're like, all right, guys, see you next week. Like, and then we'll log off, we'll talk a little bit, but we'll usually log off right after the Collision show. And I just make sure I turn all my lights off because it's super hot in here once all the lights are on. I'll go and I'll, remove my makeup and then I'm like knocking out. Or I'll probably go on TikTok for about an hour. I feel like other things, just to like ease my mind where I don't really have to think about anything because I was just thinking really hard for like 2 hours. But yeah, I'll probably go on social media. Just TikTok though, because I feel like that's fun for me. Sometimes Twitter is not fun for me.
Hmm. You brought up there Twitter not being fun for you at times.
Yeah.
How do you maintain? Because, like you said, obviously there's a lot of people that maybe applied for this opportunity with
Yeah.
Fightful and things like that. How do you maintain that I deserve to be here sort of thing when you might get comments of people being like, I applied for this and I've got more
Yeah.
experience and do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I totally get that. And for that, I would say I think that I worked really hard for what the things that I've made for myself. I feel like, you could go back and see that I've been consistent in podcasting, that I've been consistent on YouTube, and that I currently do work in radio. So I feel like the experience that I have is enough to show that like, hey, she deserves to be here. Um, but yeah, sometimes I see comments not on Fightful. I also do something else, but people are like, "Oh, who is she? Why is she talking about this? Why do we have to listen to her? Why should we listen to her?" I'm like, "You don't have to. You really don't have to. If you don't like watching me or like the work that I do, there's a lot of other people. There's a lot of other shows. So, yeah, I think that for our show specifically, we are all really, really qualified. I think the chemistry that we have is so, so good. I absolutely love Cresta and I love Rick. So I am excited you know, for whatever else is to come for all of us. We have some really big things coming to Chicago, really great pay-per-views in the future. And I can only be, filled with joy just about that stuff.
That's very, very cool. You brought up there being excited to work with Rick and Carissa as radio, as because both you and Rick are radio
Yeah.
people. What do you think you maybe have learned from Rick when it comes to podcasting and Carissa? And what do you think maybe you've shown them when it comes to podcasting?
You know what? I was really intimidated when we first started because Cresta I have known about because she is so huge on TikTok
Mm.
and she is just such a great content creator there. And I started my TikTok and I'm like, oh man, I don't know where to start. So, Cresta, I look at her stuff and I'm like, man, she's just so great. And when she's on live, I'll hop on her live and I'm like, oh my God, Cresta. And she'll be like, oh, hey, Iridian, how are you? And like, we'll chat a little bit, but she is just really killing it on that end of creating content. And Rick too, Rick, I really admire the host in him that he has because he is our moderator at the end of the day. He holds the show down. He talks about everything. He's so well spoken. And that's something that I feel like I can learn from him is just how to be more well spoken. And from Cresta, I feel like I can learn how to be a better content creator. I don't know if they've learned anything from me, but that's what I've learned from them. And yeah, I hope that that their talent rubs off on me eventually.
You brought up their talent rubbing off on you. I know
Yeah.
there's been a few shows recently where your good self was covering SummerSlam, so you weren't there this
Mm,
past week for Collision. Rick wasn't there for a couple of weeks, so
yeah.
we've seen Carissa do some work on
Mm.
her own. But like, do you feel like as a long-term thing, the Collision review wouldn't work if, say, Rick said, "I want my Saturday nights back. I'm stepping
Mm.
away," or you said it, or Carissa said it? What do you think the show would still work with the two of you?
Yeah, I feel like at the end of the day, because it was the three of us that started it, there would kind of be a void because I feel like people are used to us now. Um, if one of us wasn't there anymore, but Rick is probably gonna still be busy in the future, and there was one show where me and Cresta had to just do it solo, and Cresta also really stepped up, and she's like, okay, I'll be the moderator for today. I'm still very new to moderating, so I do hope that it's something that I get to do in the future. I can be ready for it if it's asked for, but I think that I still have a little bit of growing to do, and there are going to be days where some of us are gone. And Sean has actually talked to us about that. He wanted three people for that reason, in case one of us was gone, that you would still be able to have two hosts. Um, yeah, so I think that the way that he organized that was really, really smart because Saturdays are busy. Not everybody can be there sometimes. So as long as you always have two people there, that's would be ideal.
Mm. That's very cool. You brought up there obviously the three main people you work with when it comes to Fightful being
Mm,
Rick and Krista.
mm,
Who within wrestling media do you still want to work with
mm.
within Fightful, out of Fightful, people like that? Who's on your bucket list?
Oh man, that's a really, really good question. Probably Chris Van Vliet. I think that he is just doing some really, really amazing work. And he does both sides too. He does a little bit of hosting and a little bit of wrestling. So he has interviewed crazy amounts of celebrities. And when I started radio, that's like what I kind of wanted to do. I'm like, oh, I want to be on the red carpets. I want to interview. And he is just such a great interviewer and he has really just built up his platform. So that's the level that I want to get to. I feel he's just someone that is really, really killing it, really doing great stuff. I also really like Kathy Kelly. She is great at social media and creating content. She's super talented. So I know she's like strictly like just working for WWE, but I would also like to learn from her based on just that platform that, she's building for herself. And probably, oh man, there's just so many people in wrestling media. Um, Samantha Irving. I know she's not technically media, she's a ring announcer, but I've always in the back of my mind kind of like wanted to try ring announcing. And I feel like if I learned a couple tips and tricks, I would be, just thrilled. Not to say that I would ever, do it, but I would just kind of want to know, what goes into it. So that's really interesting. And I love Sean. I think Sean's doing fantastic stuff. So I know that I can learn a lot from Sean Ross App.
Hmm. I That is very cool when it comes to your bucket list. But what also I am curious to know, because I'm always curious to get into the mindset of my guests
Yeah.
when it comes to with everything you've achieved in wrestling media. If
Mhm.
this was to all end tomorrow, if like social media self-destructed or some, I don't know how it would end. It's a sort of question. But like, if it did all end tomorrow, would you be happy with what you've accomplished? But also, what would you want your legacy within wrestling media to be?
Mm. Yeah, I think that based on what I've built so far, just with Breast Friends alone, we've been able to do just some really cool stuff. And I guess it's because it's all the things that, we've made the call for. So like we cover this festival here in Chicago. It's a Comic-Con here. And that's something that we go to every year. We get our press pads badges and we just kind of talk to people who are attending the show. We love attending the show ourselves and we make YouTube videos and we talk about it on our podcast. So those are things right there that make us happy. And the work that I've put into Rest Friends, if there was no more wrestling anymore, I would still be able to be like, oh man, well, Rest Friends was great. And I really, really love the work that I did there. And same thing with Fightful, I think the work that I've done, I can still absolutely be doing more. I'm excited to possibly do more in the future, but if this was all, wrestling was done, I would still be happy with what I did because I'm happy with wrestling. So, yeah. And my legacy, oh man, that's
That's a
that's a
big
tough one.
question, isn't it?
That's a really, really tough one. I think what I would want people to remember me in the wrestling community is that I was really supportive, that I was entertaining, and if anybody needed help, just even questions about how to start, that I was always someone that would help. So that's how I think I would want my wrestling career to be remembered.
I'm very cool there. You brought up uh there wanting to do more with Fightful,
Mhm.
things like that. So
Yeah.
what are some more that you want to do? Like some shows you maybe want to be on? Put it out into the universe.
Yeah.
If you was to pitch a show to Sean, what would you want to pitch? What recaps would you want to be on? Things like that.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm still in the talks with Phil for Grap City. We've been talking about me being on Grap City, and Phil lives in Chicago. So I'm like, I also live in Chicago. We literally are in the same city. We can totally make this happen. So, we'll figure that out. But being on Grap City is still a goal of mine. Working probably just a solo show with Sean, that would also be cool. And I want to just continue interviewing. I think I I really like that. It's something that I think it uses a lot of my skills because I like to research. I like to just interact with people and I like to post the content afterwards. So editing and all that, that's a super fun process for me. So in the future, I would hope to probably just get more interviews and yeah, those would be my goals, my to-do list for the future.
That's very, very cool. As we look at wrapping this up already, because I do want to be respectful of your time, and we've been going nearly 45 minutes, but I've loved this conversation. I'm not going to lie. We are going to do a segment that I call generic questions. Those
Okay.
of you that have seen my interviews before, will know that's where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay per view, such as
Mm.
Double or Nothing 2019, favorite wrestler's entrance music, favorite tag team, favorite wrestler. And because Iridian's radio, I'm going to throw some music ones in there, her favorite overall song of all time, and
Oh.
her favorite album of all time, and favorite artist of all time.
Mm.
Basically, questions that Iridian might be asked on social media. So now
Mm.
she'll have a place to be like, guys, I have answered this. Go watch this, please. So, what? First of all, what is your favorite overall wrestling match of all time?
Oh man, favorite wrestling match of all time. Probably Trish and Lita when they main evented Monday Night Raw for the women's championship, where Trish had the mask on her nose. I just remember watching that match and I was very emotional as a little girl because I do remember commentary talking about how this was the first time that women had main evented and it was just such a big deal. But also a match that could give it a run for its money is Sasha Banks versus Charlotte when they main evented in a Falls Count Anywhere match on Monday Night Raw as well. It was just so, so good. And I remember Sasha won that match. It was, oh my God, it was just so good. Yeah, favorite
Is
matches.
is that the match where Charlotte basically does contortionist stuff and she
Yes.
is the bank statement is on
Yes.
her
In in
in
the
the
ramp, in
bar?
the
Yeah, yeah,
crowd.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. And that's
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
always have in my mind too. I'm like, that was so good.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view?
Ooh, favorite pay-per-view. It would probably be, oh man. That's so tough. Probably I want to say WrestleMania in Dallas when because that was my first WrestleMania that I got there. That was when Cody debuted back in WWE and I got to be there and witness it. It was insane. And also I got to see Stone Cold wrestle,
Mm.
which is just incredible in itself. So I want to say that that's my favorite pay-per-view because it was my first WrestleMania.
Did you go to both nights?
Oh, yes. And then I also did the Monday and I did the Friday SmackDown and the Hall of Fame.
Hey,
I was
hey, hey.
everywhere.
Talk about uh, pay-per-view being everywhere.
Yeah.
How with having to go for like before we continue with the generic
Yeah. Yeah.
question, a couple just have popped into my head. It's like, do you when you are at shows, do you have to take a moment to be like, wait, I'm here. How the hell did I get here? Sort of thing.
Yeah. And you know what? That happened at WrestleMania. There was just so many people there. I had never seen a stadium so full, so many lights, so many people. And we got to our seats and we were like, wow, we're really here. Like we're at the show. This is crazy. And it happens a lot of the times when I go to wrestling shows, we'll be like, oh my God, our seats are so close. This is crazy. We're so excited. And it happened for Double or Nothing. You know, we didn't think our seats were going to be as close. And the next thing you know, we're like behind the commentary team. So we're like, oh, okay, this is great, you know?
Hmm, I understand what you're saying completely there. I try to get us back onto the generic questions train because I'm really bad with these segues today, and I do apologize. But as we continue, what is your favorite wrestler's theme song of all time?
Oh man. I have a wrestling playlist, so that's really, really tough. Probably Trish. Trish's theme song is just always so, so good. But I also really like Shawn Michaels. I think his theme song is iconic. Um, yeah, as you know, the Iconics also really had a good theme song. I could go on about like really, really great theme songs, but also I love Cody Rhodes' theme song. Downstate killed it with Kingdom. They're just so good.
Mm, that could be a show on Fightful. Iridian rates theme songs, or at least an overbooked show. Like
Yeah.
that could be a very cool show. Who's your favorite tag team of all time?
Oh, favorite tag team. Probably DX when it was Triple H and Shawn Michaels. They are a big portion of what I watched growing up. I remember them when they were fighting with the Spirit Squad, when they had the bounty and everybody was trying to get the bounty from them. They they were just so hilarious. So yeah, DX.
And then actually, we'll do the music ones first. We'll do the music ones before we do your favorite wrestler. I won't do the big one yet. Your favorite album.
Oh, favorite album. It's probably going to have to be maybe Blurry Face by 21 Pilots. I'm a really, really huge fan of them. But also, one of the first albums that I had was a Shakira album where I don't remember the name, but Hips Don't Lie was on there. And it was just so, so good. It was the first album that I bought with my own money. And I remember I saved up so much of my allowance just to be able to go to Kmart and buy that.
That's very cool. And then, who is your favorite overall artist? And then the bonus one will be, who's your favorite person to see perform live?
Oh, I think both of those would have to be 21 Pilots. I have gone to see them live like three or four times. They are amazing to see live. I've been in the pit, like with, you know, everyone just so packed and the experience is crazy. But yeah, probably favorite artist. If not them, probably T-Pain. I absolutely love T-Pain. I just went to one of his concerts recently and he lived up to the hype because I just really loved watching him and his music videos and listening to him when I was growing up. So that nostalgia just kind of hit all at once. So he was also really great.
Mm, that is very, very cool. What about and then finally, this is
Mhm.
a big one, but what about your favorite song of all time?
Oh man, favorite song? That's really tough. I could easily say Barbie Girl by Aqua because I absolutely love that song. But there's just something about like old school like 80s music that I also really love because that's what like my dad had me listening to growing up. So like Take on Me, um also really, really great. What is it? Don't You Want Me, um, Karma, Chameleon from Boy George. It's just there's so many things. I feel like 80s music just really hits home with me because that's what my dad would have me listen to when I was a kid.
My brain's like a jukebox, right? And my brain has now just had a load of 80s music
Just
pop into
loaded
my
in.
head. Yeah, and that's quite funny. But as we wrap this up, Iridian, the final generic question is, who is your favorite wrestler?
Oh, John Cena. Absolutely, John Cena. He is someone that I've really just admired based on the fact that he's been able to transition from a wrestler to Hollywood, and people know who John Cena is. So I feel like he really made himself the company. When you thought about WWE, you thought about John Cena. And I have so many John Cena Funko figures. I have met John Cena before. He is literally the nicest person. He's so great and he is just fantastic. He's probably one of the reasons that I watch wrestling today. And I can only thank him for that. I've told him that in person and he was so nice to me. So it will forever be John Cena.
Have you interviewed him?
No, and that would probably be on my bucket list is to probably have that wrap up of like John Cena's not going to wrestle anymore. All right, John, what are you doing now? Like what's next for you? Because he's just been such a big movie star now that I feel like he's always going to love wrestling. But who knows? Who knows?
Hmm, I understand what you're saying completely there. But as we wrap this up, already, and obviously, I want to say thank you for coming on. This has been an amazing
Thank you.
conversation. But as we wrap this up, uh, the question I end all my interviews on is I believe with YouTube, podcasting, and social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very strange way if you think
Yeah.
about the world. So, what is one piece of content you're like, I would like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, yuck, please get rid of that?
You know what? I feel like now that our YouTube channel is like monetized, I just go back and because you have to like click every button to like make money or whatever to make the couple cents that you do. There's one specific video that we have on Rest Friends. It's like one of our early videos, so it's not the best quality and it's not the greatest length and it's all right. It's like us reacting to the Royal Rumble. It did good numbers, but I'm like if that was deleted tomorrow, it would be fine. I'd be okay with it. But I would like to be remembered probably for probably one of my interviews. You know, I've interviewed Seth Rollins before. I've interviewed Claudio when he was in WWE and still Cesaro. And, you know, I had asked him about that match where his teeth got kicked in. So that was just rough. Yeah, I feel like my interviews are some of my favorite pieces of work. So if any of those get remembered, then I would be totally fine with that.
That's very cool to hear. So as we wrap this up, promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your content, etc.?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Iridian_Fierro. But every Saturday, I am on the AEW Collision show on Fightful for the post show. You can also find Rest Friends on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Facebook. That's WREST Friends. And yeah, make sure you guys just check us out everywhere. We're always down to have conversations, and we always love talking about wrestling.
It's well worth doing, guys. I feel like I say this a lot in most of my interviews lately. One of probably the hardest working creators that I've had the chance to talk to, but one of the nicest as well. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It's Tom Talk Trash on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.